Hey, happy Thursday, everybody. It's Chamber Check-in time. Today, I have Phillip Thompson with us. He's the museum director for the Idaho Black History Museum. Hi, Phillip.
Hello, sir. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Your space is nestled right there at Julia Davis Park, and it's one of those iconic buildings that I think people pass but don't really know what's going on over there. And and I'm excited to share with the listeners a little bit about the Idaho Black History Museum, some of the current exhibits, and share a little bit about your background as well, Phillip. But before we get started, I get to thank our series sponsor for these check-ins. And as you know, Phillip, it is Delta Dental of Idaho. And Delta Dental of Idaho has been providing best-in-class dental insurance benefits to businesses and citizens for over 52 years. And with that, I'm going to share a fun factoid from their Tooth Truth series. Here we go.
Did you know that kids laugh around 400 times a day and adults just 15 times a day? Lighten up, adults.
I was at my son's jogathon this morning, and there's nothing better than listening to kids giggle and laugh. It just brightens up your day.
Very true. Very true. Gotta love kids. I have one.
So, Phillip, these check-ins are great ways to share our member stories, their origin stories, and their services and their missions. So why don't we start off with a little bit about your background, Phillip, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Idaho Black History Museum.
So my background, I'm a native Idahoan. Technically, I was born in Mountain Home simply because my father was in the service, but I've been raised in Boise, Idaho all my life. I've been here I'm the sixth generation of my family in Idaho. My former career was in IT, and then I did medical research for a bit. I thought I wanted to go to PA school. Decided I didn't want to do that, so now I work with Parkinson's patients on a therapeutic level, using boxing as a therapeutic means to alleviate the symptoms affiliated with Parkinson's. And I actually boxed in a former life for like 15 years. And I coached for a few years after that as well. So it's kind of beautiful being able to blend all those things together because we've made little like daily check-in apps for my patients to kind of keep track of on versus off time. They allow me to really nerd out, and we get really deep dive in the therapeutic side of really improving their daily outcomes, which is much more my swagger to see like this firsthand account of are you directly improving their life as opposed to just having a more touch base with them once every few months or whatever. I'm not disrespecting those that's their line of work because they're an absolutely necessary part, but I'm much more into the therapeutic weekly, twice a week, three times a week approach because I get the perk of seeing the vast improvement and delaying the onset of the pernicious approach of Parkinson's and seeing like these people really get to live their life fully through the work they put in. And I'm most importantly, I'm the proud father of the world's greatest 11-year-old, in my humble opinion.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you say boxing?
Yeah, so I boxed for I think about 15 years, coached for like 3 or 4 in the tail end of that career. And I got introduced to boxing after I had played football. I broke my neck playing football and I couldn't play football anymore. And so I had a theory that if someone were intelligent and athletic, they should be able to excel at boxing. I was painfully inaccurate and grotesquely underestimated the sheer commitment needed to box, but fell in love with it at the same time. And so boxing by far is the most beautiful sport there is, provided you don't hit the head because it's not worth the calculated risk of the traumatic brain injury.
I have an old friend of mine who grew up boxing, and he was a mountain biker. And I tell you what, he was one of the best mountain bikers, and he had the greatest mindset as well, because the effort it takes to stand in a ring with someone and match hand-to-hand combat, and the cardiovascular effort that it takes to stay in the ring that long is incredible.
It's really, it tests your fortitude and just makes you a hardier individual in general. Plus, it lowers your susceptibility to being aggravated to like an entirely new level. Nothing will get to you once you've been in the ring for 8, 9, 6, however many minutes with another person. It puts everything in perspective. I really think people need that, provided we don't hit the heads. I'm really touchy about causing head injuries.
Right.
But I really think it's a very therapeutic, beautiful thing that, honest to God, everybody should do, just because of how it teaches you like the sheer brutality of what life can be, but makes you appreciate it and not be so hot and bothered about like the petty things in traffic
Oh,
or the things that we can't control. It really puts everything where it needs to be.
put a heavy bag in the basement and get to town. That's a great workout.
Exactly.
So, Phillip, thanks again for taking your time. I came into the History Museum, the Black History Museum, a few months ago, and I that was the very first time I ever walked in there, and it was to hand off your chamber member packet in our new directory, and I met you there, and we had an amazing conversation. That's why I wanted to kind of help share. So, why don't you take me back? When did the Black History Museum start? And kind of help us with the origin story of the museum.
So the museum started I believe it was incorporated in 1998 or 1995, but the physical location opened and serving as a museum in 1999. But the building that houses what is now the Black History Museum was originally a Black church. It was the first church in the state of Idaho, and it was built by my great-great-grandfather and great-great-great-grandfather. So I grew up as a child going to that church.
Wow.
And when they outgrew it and were going on to a larger facility, my great grandmother was still alive, which would have been his daughter. And she said, told my mother, don't let them tear that building down. And my mom asked, what do you expect me to do with it? She said, I don't know, but you better figure it out. And my mother followed instruction, and the community was absolutely unbelievable, because they got behind the idea of saving this building and making it a museum. So they picked it up, moved it across the street for 3 years, got all the funding together, the 501c3, et cetera, moved it to its present location, and then opened the doors in 1999. I took over, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
And it's been a joy.
Oh, no, absolutely. And what type of current exhibit is in there right now, and what stories is it showcasing?
So we just the original exhibit was Invisible Idaho, and just telling like the history of blacks in Idaho that most are unaware of. So I revisited that subject and did Invisible Idaho in 2.0. And I think the one thing that people need to focus upon is how is it that Idaho was different than the vast majority of America in regards to its receptivity to Black Americans, right? In Idaho, we didn't have the same sociological obstacles that were, or societal, obstacles that were placed up in locations where you had a concentrated mass of Black people. So you had a legal system predicated on keeping them in their space. In Idaho, Blacks were able to gain access to the 3 things necessary to make any people be upwardly mobile: education, which leads to jobs, which leads to land ownership. I still have not only the mortgage, but the actual property of my great-great-grandfather. And the original mortgage is on this like old school, crazy thick paper. And it was satisfied like in 1917. But the fact you had a financial institution in Boise, Idaho, extending a financial agreement with a Black man, insuring it with paper to allow him to participate in what America makes you a citizen before that time, land ownership. That's huge. People don't understand the sheer impact of that. People get caught up in the minutia of, well, did we have redlining laws? Do we have whatever? Yes, but that was like 50 years later. The fact that you still had a system that allowed Black people to participate in education, jobs, and land ownership in our infancy as a state and as a city, outcomes end up being entirely different.
Well, and that's another perception versus reality, right, Phillip? And I think that's important to note. So since 1999, the Idaho Black History Museum has been right there in Julia Davis Park, and it's had different exhibits. And you said Invisible 2.0, I think is what you mentioned, is what's currently on display. Tell us the relationship with the city and the Black History Museum, especially with the Boise Police Department. Tell and share a little bit about that.
So when I'm not a museum guy, so I run a museum more from a business model, right? And I really think that the museum model is really a rather poor business model to begin with. So we need to run it more like a business. You need to be concentrated on getting people through the door. There's no such thing as museum people. There's whether or not you have a message that's attractive to a wide range of people. And if you're going to attract a wide range of people, you have to be mindful of how you tell that story to a 12-year-old. It's not going to be the same as how you tell that story to a 65-year-old. And given on where they're from, their cultural background, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't need to cater the story accordingly, but you need to be mindful of how you tell it, because you want to get the story told and be able to tell it to everyone, right? And so we use historical issues in Idaho that were, better than most to kind of jump to comparing it to what's going on elsewhere, and in the modern sense, what the narrative is. So currently, everybody's talking about reform policing. Right. We need to work with this nationally. It's like, yeah, but I agree with you. We need to do the same. But let me show you about what the policing model in Boise looks like, as opposed to you assuming that we have a policing problem predicated on racial bias in Boise, Idaho. Let's look into the data and see really what transpires. And more importantly, we're in the unique circumstance where our police department, 3 police chiefs ago, made overtures and outreach to really have me actively engaged with the police department, before in an informal fashion, now in a formal fashion, well before the vast majority of the country even fathomed getting, I'm not saying nobody did it, but for the most part, there wasn't this overwhelming urge to get community input in policing. Our police chief, under Chief Masterson in my particular case, did that 20 years ago, or maybe 15, but still, because of that, we participated in interviews, hiring, from captains to chiefs to deputy chiefs to you name it, really providing a community perspective. You can't ask for more than that. So I chuckle when people get so deep-seated in their beliefs as opposed to working towards a resolution. My opinion or how I feel really doesn't matter. It's whether or not we can envision the solution we're trying to occur and then reverse engineer from there. My opinion and my perspective is less important if I can't couple that with tangible, palpable actions to bring about the solutions that we need as a community. And that's not just as a Black or a Muslim community, that's as the community of Boise.
I love the partnership, especially, and it rings true with what Dan Prinzing and the Wasma Center is doing as well. I think that's one of their final things as new cadets that are graduating from the cadet program and to becoming a police officer. They get to go through some of that upstander mindset and what the Wasma Center is training. And I love that you're part of that as well with Idaho Black History Museum, because it's just important. And then, hey, let's talk a little bit about what's on the horizon, Phillip. What are some new events or something that we should be aware of in the near future with the History Museum?
Some of the coolest things is we have a master's student who is Boise State started this amazing program where they actually pay interns for real life work-life experience while providing a service for the institution. I've totally lost the name, but I want to say it's CAP, C-A-P. I'm sending a blurb out about it later today because we had a meeting yesterday. And she had this beautiful idea about, she likes this notion of making the tent bigger. Because I try to, our message is not catered to any one group of people. We use the historical narrative to show how Idaho did it better, but we extend those same perks to everybody regardless of your ethnic background, because all Black people aren't poor and all poor people aren't Black. So if you're gonna have this approach that, oh, we're only worried about these people, you're committing the same sin as those from generations before that only worried about these people. So for us to do the same is asinine, right? And so one thing that she really wants to do is professional development for kids in junior high kids and the junior high and high school kids, because she said that's something she never got. Whether it be the little things about the social graces, the fact that what you're wearing, how you speak, eye contact, how do you, if you're in a room like networking or whatever, how do you go about doing so? If somebody asks you what it is you do or what is it you want to do, being able to get that information communicated eloquently and concisely, how to make a resume, how to go after the skill sets that you seek. If in fact you don't have them now, how does one go about getting them? I mean, so we're going to do that starting with, I just had the comment got done. I went to the Micron groundbreaking, and my daughter was just chuckling. She's like, well, why is it such a big deal? I said, baby, it's jobs.
Yeah.
She said, okay, and I said, you got to understand, regardless of someone's background, in order for any human to thrive, they have to have access to an economic model that allows them to provide for themselves and then therefore provide for their kids. And then typically the next generation will do even better than the last. We get into the weeds about all this racial animosity, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, about what happened in America's past. Yes, let's acknowledge it, but I'm pretty sure everybody's well aware. Let's work on tangible, palpable application of what we've learned from that in the here and now, without excluding in the same way that they did previously.
Right.
And so that's one of our big things is jobs, skills, training, trades. The fact that not everybody wants to go to college, not everybody has to go to college, and we can afford to go to college. I was just at a conference moments ago where CWI has partnered with this Teens to Trades program.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to jobs, and people need to deal with that first and foremost. Are we preparing people to be able to take and have those jobs, regardless of what course of action it is, and teaching at the same time? But if you can't provide for your family, you can't do anything.
Right. No, I love that, Phillip, that you're focusing on that. Hey, where and how can folks help the Idaho Black History Museum? How can we donate? I'm going to put your website on the screen. Tell me if this is correct. Is it new.ibhm.org? Is that the website?
Yeah, and momentarily it'll bounce back to just ibhm.org. We're just in the process of updating and adding a few things in keeping with the new things we're launching. But yes, they both go to the same place, so that's fine.
And how do we help? What types of things are you looking for? Volunteers, donations? Help me understand that.
Donations to keep funding most of these projects, because the biggest thing we really try to do is keep the first thing I did when I took over is removed any entry fee to the museum. If you remove that barrier, you have that many more people coming in. We change exhibits often, so you always have a reason to come in, even though you're staying with that core message. You can do little variances on that on that exhibit, so people have a reason to come back, and more importantly, have something to give the kids when they leave. So our next project is we're printing these rulers that have Idaho's Black history starting from like 1864, when a Black man came here by the name of Lewis Walker and ended up owning like half of Silver City when that was the thriving metropolis of Idaho. People don't know that history. And so people are getting in this fight about, how history is told. Yeah, I hear you, but I'm going to tell the history as it was. There's nothing to apologize for. This is just what it is. But we can use that as a template. Is why was it that people were able to achieve in Idaho at a greater level than we were elsewhere, simply by getting out of the way and allowing people access to the skills they need and giving them the opportunity. I mean, opportunity coupled with hard work, outcomes are much greater.
Oh, absolutely. Phillip, while I have you for a couple more minutes, is there anything else that you'd like to educate the public on while I have you?
Biggest thing is just that please come in and see us, because we are really trying to really widen our audience and make for certain that everybody's aware and stay out of these predilection that people have of arguing over, political ideologies, because they're both, I try to assume, well-intended. They're simply trying to achieve a given goal, and they have different ways of how I think we need to get there. So if we keep our eye on the prize of the solution that we're trying to achieve, and work cooperatively to do so, we can get there. We need not be distracted by, well, he's a lefty, he's a righty,
Right.
he's a from Idaho, he's a not from Idaho. I mean, we all want for our kids to be able to live better than we did, live safely, and live happily and healthily, right? There's no more complex than that. How we go about doing it is cool, but we're willing to work with people who are trying to accomplish the same. And that's what's most important, because as we spoke about, like with this Micron thing, it's all about jobs at the end of the day. We all want to take care of our kids, and we can tell our varied histories while doing so without excluding anybody. And it's not a case of mine being better than yours, or yours doesn't need attention as well. It's simply we've got to provide the opportunity and a conduit to tell those varied histories, because we'll find out at the end of the day we have much more in common than we ever had differentiating us. You can choose to focus on that 30% that we have not in common,
Right.
but it's much easier and much more beneficial to deal with that 60% we have in common, and then that 10 that's in between, it's like, leave it be, we'll be good.
Okay, hours of operation. When can we come visit?
We're open Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, 11 to 3. And then on Fridays, 10 to 1.
Okay, and all those hours of operations are on your website as well.
Yep, and on the sign in front of the building, and on the voicemail as well.
Yeah. Well, Phillip, thanks so much for taking some time with me today, help share the Idaho Black History Museum story, and some of the mission and vision behind it, and some upcoming events. I love that you're talking about thinking about what we have in common versus what we don't, and focusing on those things that will impact and elevate the whole community. I love it, Phillip.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, sir. My apologies for the tardiness of my appearance.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Hey, we had lots of comments today, lots of listeners today. Again, anyone interested in learning more about the Idaho Black history here in Idaho, there's a museum. We have a museum downtown in Julia Davis Park. Go visit Phillip. And thank you so much for your membership. It means the world to us. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, sir.